So for all you 42-year-olds out there who think you're too old to become an airline pilot, we just smashed that myth.
I used to joke with people learned to bake bread during the pandemic. I learned to fly airplanes. So I got my PPL like August 2020. I just flew all over Southern California. I would find an airport that was 50 miles so I could get my cross-country credit for it. And just, El Monte, I've never been there. Let's go there. And just visited all kinds of airports, flying and seeing different parts of the country. I really cherish that part of my training.
So now let's talk a little bit about pilot pay. As airline pilots, you get paid in a variety of different ways. There's a bunch of stuff.
So people look at that hourly rate sometimes and it's like, yeah, but that, like my time commuting out to California, not being paid. Yeah. Waiting in the terminal, not being paid. Planning the weather and the fuel, not getting paid. People boarding, still not getting paid yet.
And that's called what kind of time?
Block time.
Block time. There you go. Okay.
Yep.
Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of the Fly with Trent podcast. On the show with me today is an airline pilot by the name of Cameron. He is a fairly new first officer at a regional airline in the United States. And in this interview, you're going to hear Cameron and I talk about three phases. The first phase is the phase of Cameron's flight school phase. We're going to talk about the type of flight school he went to, the pros and cons of the type he went to versus the other kinds of flight schools he could have went to, and how his proved to be more beneficial and so forth. Then we're going to talk a bit about the time building phase, talk about some of the things that Cameron did to get himself to ATP minimums. And then at the end of the interview, we're going to talk about life as an airline pilot, what it means to be on reserve versus a line holder, how much money you can make, what commuting means and how that actually works, and a whole bunch of other things that I think if you're considering a career as potentially a professional pilot, be it a corporate pilot or an airline pilot, that you're going to find very, very interesting and insightful. So please join me in welcoming Cameron to the show. Hey, Cameron. Welcome to the show. Thanks very much for being here with myself and the Fly with Trent audience.
Hey, Trent. It's good to see you again.
So we know each other. And for the audience, they don't know who you are. So let's start there. You obviously are a pilot. Tell us a little bit, just the 60-second background of kind of who you are today. And then we're going to go back in history a little bit and unpack on how you got there. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about what it's like being, I'm giving it away, an airline pilot. So, what reserve is and the line holder and what the pay looks like and a bunch of the nitty gritty stuff that people who are considering this as a career might be quite interested to learn more about.
Sure. Yep. So I'm a first officer at a regional airline. I am based in LA. I live in Texas. So we'll get into commuting later about that. Okay. But born and raised in Southern California, did the CFI route, so I'm not former military. So yeah, that's like the high level 60-second about me.
Okay.
And
so let's go back in time a little bit then. You don't look like you're 23. So this is probably a career later in life for you. Is that right?
Indeed. I was almost 42 when I did my discovery flight.
Cool.
Yeah.
So for all you 42-year-olds out there who think you're too old to become an airline pilot, we just smashed that myth. All right. So you did a discovery flight, you picked a flight. I'm assuming, did you pick a flight school or did you train with a flying club or an independent flight instructor?
Yeah, it was a small flying club. So, I took my discovery flight like the first week of March 2020. So everything shut down for COVID weeks after that. But yeah, it was a small flying club with like 2 CFIs, little non-towered airport, and just worked on getting my PPL. I used to joke with people learned to bake bread during the pandemic. I learned to fly airplanes. So yeah. I got my PPL like August 2020. So, and then it continued there for my instrument. And then, that's when we moved to Texas. And then I went to a more formal flight school. Not a 141, which has got the syllabus and all this stuff, but not like a little mom and pop flying club either, like a real flying school.
So we're going to dive into that just a little bit more because I think there's some lessons there that we can share with the audience. So for your private, You did a very small flying club. Costs were probably lower. It's at a small airport. It's non-congested airspace, so you probably weren't wasting a lot of time going back and forth to the practice area, which is expensive to
Yep.
do that, commuting back and forth. And
It
you
does
and
add
you
up.
and you know lots. We have lots of other mutual friends who maybe had different training experiences. Maybe they went to big box schools or 141 schools. With respect to the private pilot phase, um, is there any insights that you can share with the audience about what was good or not good about the path that you took? And it's kind of the same as what I took, versus, say, going to a big box 141 school that has the rigid structure in the syllabus and so forth.
Yeah. The biggest thing really where that was, and so this will depend on your location, was the weather was very good. It's the high desert, so it's something like 15 overcast days a year. Um, it was a small flying club, so the rental rate for the plane was the least expensive I've ever rented out of. Um, but as you know, Trent, some people, depending where they live, that may not be true. But
Yeah.
where it was inexpensive. Um, I got a CFI who had a lot of availability, partly because of the pandemic, probably, and was able to fly very frequently. But there are some big box flight schools where you will fly very frequently, so that's not necessarily an advantage with that one. But I would say the lower cost, and definitely when you're first getting your shoes wet, non-towered little quiet airport is a lot more chill. You
Mm-hmm.
know, people that learn to fly in big cities, like, just there's just so much you're trying to learn in the beginning. So having to do a lot of radio work and more complicated airports with it would be a lot more to have to learn when you're just starting out.
It is a lot more to learn, but I think it's I don't know that it's all bad, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole in this interview. I trained at a towered airport, so I was learning to work the radio from day one. Yes, it was a little trickier at the beginning, but then later on, radio was never intimidating for me. And I had many
Yep.
students who came to me, and we were when they came to me, we were training in a Charlie. They'd never been in an air, and they were like their hands were shaking when they were talking on the radio, like they were. It was super duper intimidating. So two sides to that coin. I don't know that one side is better than the other. But for Part 61 schools, I think we can probably both agree that more flexible, generally probably going to cost you less. Not always, but
Generally,
if you choose your training environment correctly, probably going to cost you less. No stage checks. And that's something, by the way, folks, I'm going to be covering in an upcoming video where I'm talking in much more detail about the difference between Part 61 and Part 141 schools. So if you're interested, stay tuned to the channel because that's coming. Or it may have even been published by the time this one's published. So just search on my videos. But generally speaking, pretty good experience and not the most expensive way to go, and relatively brisk to get through that first certification. Would you say that that's more or less an accurate assessment?
I think that's accurate. And generally, your Part 61 instructors will be able to custom tailor your lessons more for you. If you're really struggling with, say, short field landings, they can just focus on that. Whereas the syllabus in 141 may not allow as much flexibility with
Mm-hmm.
that. But on the flip side, also, if you're at a 61, I think it's a little easier for instructors to maybe milk you for time than in a 141, just because of the way the structure is in that one. But that also really comes down to your instructor also,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of where you're training. Some instructors are unfortunately not entirely focused on your learning and more on their hours, but that's really specific to part
Yeah.
141 to 61. But and I think we've talked before how even at a part 61, there are a lot of instructors that have a very detailed syllabus, so that's not necessarily a disadvantage. It depends on the instructor, I think.
Absolutely. And in my case, I did have a very detailed syllabus. It was based in software. Students could see it. They knew exactly what lessons we were going to be working on next. But thanks to the flexibility of Part 61, you're absolutely right. If they were struggling with any particular maneuver or any type of landing, we were able to just hang out and work on that until they weren't struggling on it anymore, or even revisit it a little later on, because as a 61 instructor, you can do whatever you want with your student whatever you and your student agree to do for flying on that particular day is what you get to do. And I think that that's an advantage, especially for career 2.0 folks who maybe are older, more experienced, have been through learning environments before, and are comfortable with more of an independent path. That's why it's one of the reasons why I'm such a big advocate for Port 61. Plus, I just think it's faster. All right, so but we're not, I don't want to talk forever about flight school, so let's move on a little bit. So I think you said, was it for your instrument or for your commercial training that you went to Texas?
Yeah, we moved like days after I got my instrument check ride done. So yeah, so commercial and CFI were in Texas. I did my double I in Ohio at an accelerated school. And then it was a couple years, I think, till I did my multi over in
Yeah.
Texas.
Okay, so we'll get to that. Let's talk about the commercial first. My opinion of the training for the commercial certificate, it's not really an opinion, it's just based upon what's in the requirements. It's just a whole lot of solo flying with some maneuvers thrown in with tighter tolerances. Would you agree?
Um,
Maybe
yeah,
my
I'd say
memories.
so. But it also depends on whether, some people come back to commercial years or decades after they got their private. Others in those bigger schools are just going like, check ride, check ride, check ride.
Yeah.
So yeah, for them, there's a lot of a lot of overlap and repeat of stuff. But yeah, it's a weird one just because it's as you know, it unlocks the ability to be compensated as a pilot.
Yeah.
Um, and I think as long as people really look at it that way, it's like, hey, so you want to make this a career now, not a hobby. So this is the standard you need to be at.
Yeah.
Whereas PPL, you can get away with a lot just because we know tons of guys that just own their own plane, they just do their own thing,
Yeah.
barely ever
Am-
have passengers. They're not. It's not a business, so they just have fun and do what they want to do. So you know,
Amateur versus pro. So let's talk a little bit then about the difference in the experience. Were you at a much larger, you said you weren't at a 141, but you were at a much larger school when you were in Texas. Is that right?
yeah, yeah.
Was there any benefits or drawbacks of the bigger school versus the smaller flying club?
I don't know. I mean, they had more planes, but there were more students, so I think the ratios were actually better for me at the flying club. They had a syllabus, which um, was nice.
Okay, so
Um,
no huge differences then. So probably don't need to dwell on this part. Okay,
no.
let's move on. You now graduated. You've got your commercial certificate. You've got a measly 250-ish hours or so. Hard to get a job at that point in time, other than maybe being a flight instructor. So let's talk about the time building phase. So now we're sort of in phase two of the interview here. What did you do for time building?
Well, my phase two actually happened before my commercial while I was working my instrument, but same theory. I just flew all over Southern California. I would find an airport that was more than 50 miles so I could get my cross country credit for it and just, like, oh, El Monte, I've never been there. Let's go there and just visited all kinds of airports. I didn't make it to all of them, but I went to a whole lot of different airports. I decided to do a cross country to Utah to satisfy the requirement for commercial. So I
Mm-hmm.
went, you know, all the way to Utah. So yeah, that was fun. Just flying and seeing different parts of the country. I really cherished that part of my training, the time building. Um, I always hear about pilots that just fly back and forth between the same like two or three airports to build their time. That just seems dreadfully boring.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
I did the same thing for my commercial cross country. I went to uh, oh shoot, I can't remember. It was in Illinois. I was training in Ohio. It was in Illinois. It was about a four. I don't even remember how far the flight was. Obviously far enough to meet the requirements. But I remember the scariest part being, so of course I had an instrument rating, and when I wanted to leave early in the morning so that I could get the whole trip done in the day, and there was an overcast layer right above the airport at about oh god, I don't remember. Maybe it was 600 feet, maybe it was 1,200 feet. I don't remember. It was legal, whatever it was. And but we all knew it was thin, so I wasn't going to be in it for long. And so I go blasting off down the runway and take off through this layer, and for only about 3 or 4 seconds, I was in the pure white stuff. It was the first time I think that I was solo in the soup, and then I popped out into blue sky, and I had blue sky for the rest of my trip. But that was pretty intimidating, to be honest with you. All right, so you flew around, you visited a lot of airports. Now you were not a CFI, correct?
No,
No, you weren't.
I was not. I was
Okay.
not.
Okay. So how on earth did you get all the way to 1,500 hours? Were you literally just paying for the time out of your own pocket, or did you manage to
Oh
get some?
no. I got my CFI rad for commercial. My time building was before commercial.
Oh, okay.
So the
Sorry, I
yeah.
meant time building to ATP
Ah,
minimums.
the HP. No, that was CFI.
Okay.
So yeah, I basically finished my commercial check ride and went straight into CFI training
Okay.
and taught for 2.5 ish years at a flight school, same airport but different school. And the school I taught at was a 141, so it's sort of interesting to see both sides of it. Not as a student at the 141, but having my own students there instructing. So yeah.
So I do want to ask you a question that about the one. I mean, we could spend a lot of time talking about it, but again, I'd rather spend more time on the airline phase. But talk to me about stage checks. Here's I never went to a 141 school, so I never had a stage check in my life. But I had a student that came to me. His name was Ben, and I asked him one day. So he came to train with me after he got his private. He wanted to work on his instrument rating with me, and I said, "Hey, you were training with the biggest school in the valley. Uh, why do you want to switch?" And he's like, "Because every week 50% of my flights would get canceled due to either lack of aircraft or instructor not showing up, or their minimums because of their insurance provider. Their minimums were really conservative, and so when the Part 61 guys were flying around, everybody at this school was stuck on the ground." And then he also told me about stage checks. So tell the audience what a stage check is and why they happen in 141 and not 61. And then we'll talk about maybe I can share Ben's experience of why they were such a problem and why they cost him so much time. But let's hear from you first.
Okay. So yeah, like we talked earlier, the 141 has a very rigid syllabus. Like literally, like we talked earlier about flexibility with your students in Part 61. There's none of that in 141. Lesson 3 must follow lesson 2, and then 4, 5, 6, 7 in order. And they have stage checks. So a stage check instructor, which is what I did, would fly with a student. I will say Part 61 is very similar things. Probably your school is like mine. If a student was getting ready to do their first solo, usually they had to fly with a different CFI to kind of get the thumbs up from someone that wasn't their daily instructor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and most 61 schools, you'll do some sort of like mock check ride or some sort of evaluation at the end before your actual check ride. So stage check is like that, but more formal in that it has to be a different instructor. They're specially trained to conduct it. So there's line items we have to hit,
Mm-hmm.
and so the one before your check ride was essentially a mock check ride with every line item that you would expect to see on the check ride to the same standards. And
Let,
there's usually an oral component, and then the flight, which would be on different days.
so
Um,
so let me share with you what Ben told me, because maybe it was a situation that was unusual to the school. Um, so in in his case, at this particular school, there were only a handful of stage check CFIs. And the way the school's rules were, now maybe this is 141 rules or they were just the school's rules, I don't know. When you got to the hour threshold where you had to have a stage check, the maximum you could fly without a stage check was 5 hours past that threshold. And
hmm.
invariably, he would have to wait 2 to 3 weeks to get scheduled with a CFI that could do the stage check. So he said to me, Trent, like with every stage check, it was like I got grounded for 3 weeks because I'd
Hmm.
fly my maximum of 5 hours past the threshold, and then I had to stop. I couldn't do anything. I could not go flying, and they wouldn't put me in the plane any sooner for the stage check. And he says it just drove me absolutely crazy. So is that something that's standard at 141 schools, or was that unique to the school that he attended?
Well, I'm only really familiar with the one I went to, but I will tell you that it kind of sounds like they overscheduled the planes at his school. Texas has storms that roll through. So, sure, if you're a PPL student, you might get canceled because the weather's IFR. Um, but they try to look at the schedule, the weather forecast, and try to schedule accordingly. I did have priority if a plane went down during the day and there's only one plane left for two missions, we would get priority as a stage check,
Mm-hmm.
because that has to go. But I would say out of 2.5 years, I probably bumped someone out of a flight less than a dozen times because I was stage check.
Okay.
Um, so it may just be ours was scheduled better. The way ours worked is the stage check was a syllabus lesson number. So once you got to the one before it, the next lesson is the oral. So yeah, you
Yeah.
couldn't fly because your next thing was the oral exam, but the wait time for an oral exam was like a couple days. Yeah, usually 2 days. If you passed that, then they would schedule you for your flight. So if everything went well, within 5 days, you should have been, doing your stage flight at our school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Occasionally, if the weather was bad, the students might have to wait, but that was more a function of the weather than the stage check itself. Because at your school, if someone's going to go solo for the first time and it keeps giving you 800-foot clouds, they're not going no matter what, stage
Yeah.
check or not, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so it was really mostly weather or maintenance issues. But yeah, never. There were some students that waited a long time just because we'd have a whole month of bad weather, um, so they just got unlucky. But
How how many stage checks are there on the way to the private pilot certificate?
there are three, and at our school, two for all the other programs.
Okay.
So
So even
um,
even if you're only waiting 5 days and there's three stage checks, that's 15 days of what I'll call lost time, which would have frustrated me to no end because when I was in school, I wanted two flights a day every day, 7 days a week.
yeah, yeah. At our school is like one flight a day, and they try to schedule you like 6 days a week if they could. So normally it'd be like Wednesday you did your final flight. Thursday you'd probably have your stage oral, and then you'd probably fly on Saturday for your stage flight. So if it went well, you only really wasted one day. But
Okay.
again, just depended. But um, yeah, for a while I was the only one that was doing PPL ones and qualified to do PPL ones. So there was sometimes a wait of a bit for people, but yeah, it just depended.
Okay. All right, let's move on to phase three, life at the airlines. So let's first begin talking about by how one gets to the airlines. So the what do you need to do to be eligible to be hired at a 121 operator, which is fancy airplane speak for an airline.
Well, assuming you are non-military, because I'm not super familiar with the military path, but most people need 1,500 hours of total time in their logbook, and then there's some other requirements like nighttime and instrument time and cross country time. But
Yeah.
most people get those knocked out on the way to 1,500. So generally, 1,500 is the last threshold to cross, and then you apply to the airlines, usually the regionals, and sometimes it's the hiring is really going, and sometimes it's not. So, but
Mm-hmm.
that is 1,500 is so you're eligible, like you said, to fly for the airlines.
And at this point in time, folks, the data says that the hiring is good. So if you're getting close to ATP minimums right now, you probably already know that the hiring is good. So, with respect to you get the call, you're going to get an interview, yay! But then immediate fear of like, oh my God, I got to get ready for this interview. What tool or resource did you use? I know which one I used. I'll bet you used the same one. But what tool or resource did you use for interview prep for your airline interview?
Are we naming companies that do it, or that's not that kind of video?
No, we don't need to give the. Well, actually, let's give. They're going to get a free plug. I'm not affiliated with the company that you may or may not name if it's the same as me in any way, shape, or form. I receive no compensation in any way, shape, or form. And if a whole bunch of
Likewise.
people come and sign up, then you guys are welcome.
Yeah, so there are a lot of interview prep, resume review, application review companies out there. I use Spitfire Elite. There's lots of I think it have a
Yeah, I
dozen
didn't
off the
use
top of my
that one.
head, and they're all good. I mean, I hear good things from people that use all the various ones. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, there's prep. I know that my regional airline will, if you're a cadet, they have like I think it's twice a month, sort of like interview preparation Zoom
Hmm.
meetings. So,
Yeah, they help
those
you
can be
get
very
ready.
helpful. Yeah, they help you get ready. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of resources out there. Of course, the internet's full of resources on
Yeah.
these kinds of things. So, um, but yeah, you definitely want to put in some effort. You know, probably not going to go well if you just wing it for the interview.
No, I'll bet you I put 40 hours into studying for my interview, and I did very well, good enough to get the job apparently. But the guy did comment at the end. He was like, "Wow," he says, "You were really really well prepared. Like, how did you learn all this stuff?" And I said, "Well, I just used name of the website that I used, and I really and if you Google the one I use is probably going to be near the top." But that's all I studied. They pretty much give you the gouge, and I just spent 40 hours going over and over and over until I crammed it all into the dense round thing on top of my shoulders, and then I was ready to go. So after you succeed, you get a CJO, conditional job offer,
Yep.
which is it's conditional on a whole bunch of things. But most people that think it's conditional on getting through their training or INDOC, which it is absolutely conditional on that. But it's also conditional on your logbook inspection, that you didn't hide any DUIs, that you didn't hide any criminal past, that like, because they're going to look into you and they're going to know
Hmm.
who they are hiring. They're going to do a full background check. I was surprised at how detailed it was. So, word to the wise: if you are trying to hide something, don't, because they're going to find it and you are going to get fired or not hired. Because the one things that airlines, in your and my experience, don't like is dishonesty.
Yeah. I mean, if you have it, you have it. But if you try to hide it, it just makes it worse.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
yep. Yep.
All right. So let's talk briefly about INDOC. What is INDOC? And like in the first 2 months, in which I made it halfway through and until my health care or health issue came along and ruined it for me. So I'm going to finish it later. But tell me just a high level overview. Again, I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time, but people are going to be curious, like, what's INDOC? So what is it?
Yeah. INDOC is stage one or two, depending on whether you count, the ATP, CTP. But it's your first real contact with the airlines, with the training program, with how much stuff you've got to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Like that one minimums uh, rule that you loved so much in INDOC, derived minimums and stuff. So yeah, lots of stuff you get to learn, and you get a big written test you got to pass. Everybody passed. I mean, we're sweating bullets, but they do train you well, and if,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you put in the effort, which we all did, then you should pass. So yeah,
I
you're
remember thinking early on, like in the first week, I was thinking, oh my god, there's no way I'm going to pass. I was
yeah,
freaking
you were
out.
freaking out a little bit, but yeah, we
Yeah.
we just studied. I mean, how many people were always in that lounge studying? So I
Yeah.
mean, we just figured it out. So yeah, so the training is essentially like 8 or 9 weeks of just 12-hour days, and I mean, you get some days off here and there, but they're just really like days you didn't go to the classroom, but you're still
Yeah.
studying.
Yeah.
Um, and there's all kinds of what they call validations. So it's like a test, either written tests. There are simulator tests. There are other kinds of tests that you got to pass, and you get trained for. Yeah, it's intense. Really really intense.
Now,
But
we should probably add that not every airline's INDOC process is the same as every other airline. The one that we're referring to is widely regarded as the best, highest quality training in the industry. And I think that's one of the reasons why it is so intense. Because I have talked off the record to pilots that went to other airlines and they were like, oh, yeah, it was like not that hard. And,
Yeah, or 2 or 3 weeks shorter or
yeah,
something. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, the takeaway here, folks, is if you really, really struggled with your orals on the way up to your commercial pilot certificate, uh, you better be ready for some seriously difficult studying because it sure is not going to get any easier when you get to INDOC.
Hmm.
Okay, so in the second half of INDOC is the fun part, or it should be the fun part when you're in the sims. I didn't get to do that part, unfortunately, because of the health issue that everyone who watches my channel knows about. I lost my medical,
You
so that
just missed
sucked.
out on the fun part.
I know. So tell me a bit about your experience in the sims.
Well, yeah, it's your first time, quote, at the controls, in the identical cockpit with like a zillion switches and levers and buttons that you always see if you poke
Mm-hmm.
your head in through the cockpit door. And it's fun. It's exciting. I had the 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. slots, so that was a little less exciting.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, some guys had the 6 to 10 o'clock one when they show before the morning. So definitely try and get a more normal time slot if you can. That would really, I think,
yeah.
help a lot with your sleep schedule. But
Oh,
yeah,
so
it's
hold on. Let's give them the tip on how to make that happen because they're now I don't
yeah.
know that every class is the same, but so go ahead and tell I think what I'm going to tell because I'm not supposed to be doing all the talking here. But you remember the tip on how you could get a good sim schedule?
Yeah, get cadet program, get an early employee number, or if you get really lucky and there's upgrade captains in your class, which is actually quite rare, they said. So I'm not sure it's a tip that your viewers can really use,
Okay.
but yeah, they hadn't seen one in months, and um, because we'll get upgrade classes, which is everybody's a captain that's upgrading or transitioning,
Yeah.
but get mixed in with us was pretty rare, but it was good. It was really good, but
So what
yeah.
Cameron is saying there is we had upgrade captains in our class, and in when you go in the sim, it's always two pilots that go in. So there was a few of us, self included. I did a little horse trading to get because there was a Canadian, Paula, who was an upgrade captain, and so I ended up being her
Particularly
partner,
transition captain, but yes, yeah.
transition captain. Excuse me, because they were transitioning from one airframe to the other. They obviously have the most seniority, so they get first pick at the sim schedules. And whatever they pick, if that's your partner, then that's going to be your schedule as well. And so that worked. It should have worked out very well for me, but unfortunately, I didn't get there. And so Paula, I think, had to pick a new partner. But nonetheless, that's the little tip I wanted to pass on with people. If you're in that situation, get to know those captains, buddy up early on, so that when sim schedule time comes, that you're not doing the graveyard shift in the sim because
Yeah,
that's probably
or
not going
or
to
make
work.
friends with the more senior FOs in your class
Yep,
because that works too.
yep,
Yep,
absolutely,
yep.
absolutely. Okay, so you graduate, and then what? I think you become a reserve pilot, right?
Yeah, yeah. You the last part of training is with a special line check captain. You get to fly 2 or 3 trips with actual passengers in the back, flying actual routes out of airports, and yeah, it's kind of like, oh wow, there's people on board now. So so yeah, that's interesting. Just because a lot of the stuff in the simulator is in the simulator, and then you get on the line and you're like, wow, this is different. Things are more fast paced. Um, there's obviously no pause button, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just yeah, you're gonna get what you're gonna get. So yeah, then you're out, and usually you start as a reservist. So they award you a base. I started at San Francisco, and so as anybody who flies regularly knows, weather or maintenance or flights that inevitably get canceled or delayed. So they call you up when you're on reserve and say, "Hey, we need you to do this flight because Well, they usually don't tell you why, but it's somebody got sick or flat tire on the way to the airport. So the original pilot that was assigned to a particular leg or a whole trip is no longer able to make it. So they want
Hmm.
punctuality and schedules, everything in the airlines, right? So they call you to pick it up if if anything falls through. So
So what's the difference between long call reserve and short call reserve?
well, it depends on the airline. At mine, short call means that during your period when you're on call, they can call you and say, "We need you at the gate in 2 hours," which I've had that call a couple times. Sometimes they'll be like, "Hey, it's 6 in the morning. You've got to be at the gate at 10 a.m." So they give you a little bit more time,
Hmm.
but the minimum is 2 hours. Long call is a minimum of, I think it's 12 hours
Yeah.
or 24 hours. I forget.
Well,
Yeah, 12. So that one, if you're a commuter like me, would be great, but um, I've never managed to get long calls. So
so all
go
of your
figure.
stuff is short call.
Yeah. So I'm actually leaving tomorrow to go to California to be in position for gig again. So
So let's talk about that because I want people to understand what commuting and reserve is and how it affects your quality of life. And luckily, it's not forever. I've paid attention to the text string that we all have going on with everybody. And I think I think you even said you might be a line holder next month. Is that right?
yeah, but that's because I'm in the designated mountainous airport program, so that's a little bit different. But yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
if you can live, like a friend of mine started training at Republic about 2 weeks after we did, and he's single, not married, no kids, so he just moved to Boston where he got awarded a
Yeah.
base. Being married with 4 kids, even though some of them are out of the house, that wasn't an option.
Yeah.
So, but if you can move, so basically, if you're on call and you live 20 minutes from the airport and they call you with a 2 hour call out, you don't
Exactly.
even have to be dressed or shaved yet. You can just be like in your jammies and just be like, oh, okay, let me get ready and get to work.
Yeah.
But when you commute, like I do, you've got to fly out there usually the day before, because mine starts at 3 in the morning, so it's got to be the night before for me. And so yeah, you lose some time at home because of the commuting.
So
Um,
so let's unpack this a little bit. You've got to fly out there. So in your case, the airline is going to buy you a ticket to get you to LA,
and
right?
non-rev.
Oh yeah, that's right. You're doing non-rev. Excuse me. Non-rev,
Yep.
folks, means you're just riding for free. So you're
Yep.
in a non-rev to LA. You then have to pay for your accommodation in LA, right? For the duration of that shift, which is going to be probably 3 days. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So
Yep.
what do
Now
you?
some airlines will get you a hotel. Um, I think some of the majors do. Like I was talking to an Alaska pilot, and I think they get a hotel at least the
Okay.
first night or something like that. I stay with my folks because I grew up in LA, so that's an
Well, that's easy.
option. One of our classmates, he has a crash pad, so he shares an apartment with technically like a whole bunch of people that are just not usually there. So
Hmm.
and he's 5 minutes from the airport, so that's pretty convenient. And then one of our other classmates, he's from LA too, and he literally lives 5 minutes north of the airport, so it's pretty easy for him. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No kidding.
yeah.
All right. So for the duration, so if it's a 3 day shift, you're basically just hanging out in the hotel, um, doing whatever the heck you want to, waiting for that phone to ring because the whole definition of reserve is you don't know whether you're going to fly or not, but you just need to be in LA to be ready, right?
Pretty much.
So how
Yep.
often so far have you gone sat in a hotel? Is it usually a 3 day or is it sometimes four?
It's 3 to 5 days,
Three to
depending on
five.
how your schedule is.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll call that an average of 4 days. So you're going to go out there and sit in the hotel for 4 days. How often does that happen to you so far where you go and you don't fly?
2 or 3 times.
So most of the time you end up flying.
Yeah. Although sometimes it's like day 4, they give me like a one leg thing. like fly this plane to Oklahoma City and then we'll buy you a ticket back. And then that was all I did for 4 days. So
Hmm.
it just depends. It just
Hmm.
depends.
And then, so commuting plus reserve is generally not the thing that people want to do most when they grow up, but there
No.
is usually an end to it. So talk about what can bring, so there's you at some point you can even ask to change bases, but that's
Yep.
going, so explain to me how that works, because I vaguely remember, but maybe you have a little bit more intimate knowledge on when, why, and how you could apply for a different base.
Well, the when is as soon as you get your first base award. So for us, I was at the end of training, our time in Denver. But you can just give it's a you can put as many bases as you want, and you order them. This is my number one choice, two, three, four, five. You can have like 13 or 12 or whatever you want on there, and then how long till you get a better one is really just completely out of your control. Every month they process transfers. So, people are retiring or they're, moving on to other airlines or otherwise not being employed anymore. So those vacancies will get filled based on seniority.
Yep.
So let's say two openings for an FO happen in Boise. They go and see, hey, who wants to go to Boise? And they just go down the list in order of seniority. Some people will be like, oh yeah, Boise's my number three, but I really want, this other airport. And if there's one for them, they'll go to their first pick first. So maybe you'll be higher up on the list than it seems like, depending
Hmm.
on what people want and what's
Hmm.
open. And they just go through pure seniority until everyone gets slotted and they run out of spaces, and then everyone else is just waiting. So, you know,
And so
um,
in your case, remind me, did you say you live in Denver?
no, I live in Austin.
Austin. So,
Yep,
and I don't remember, is there a base in Austin?
there is. It's the smallest ERJ base we have. Yeah,
Okay. And are you trying to get to that as your base? I would assume you are.
I am. Yeah,
Okay. Okay. To get rid of the
but
commute.
since I finished training, they've only awarded 4 people total. Austin. There's just not a lot of movement.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So at some point, this it gets better as you move up the ladder on seniority.
Yep.
The first thing that maybe happen is you become a line holder instead of being on reserve. Do you think
Hmm.
is do you think that's more in your case? And everybody's case is different, so take it all with a grain of salt. Do you think it's more likely you're going to become a line holder before you're going to be able to get the base that you want? Sounds like the answer is probably yes.
It's hard to say. I'm pretty high of the list of people now waiting for Austin, so I'm hoping that happens soon. But everyone's different. Some people will get the base they want. I mean, most of our class got the base they wanted out the get go, pretty much
Yeah.
within the first month or two. And so for those guys, they'll be waiting quite a while. So definitely, my advice is if you can move to a base, and if you like the base, living there and flying out there, then move if you can. Um, and then yeah, it just depends on, because every month's slightly different of how much flying is going to happen. So I know some captains that they're kind of on that cusp where some months they get a line and some months they're on reserve
Yeah.
because it kind of ebbs and flows with staffing and with the amount of flying they expect to do. So it does all depend on a lot of other factors, though.
Yeah, which is common. There's a just a whole ton of variables that affect you
Yep.
as a pilot at a Part 121 operator. So we're going to talk about compensation in just a minute, but before we skip out of this section, let's just make sure that everybody understands the difference between a line holder and being on reserve. So on reserve, we're established. You're basically a substitute pilot. You're on call. You go
Yep.
someplace. You wait for the phone to ring. What's a line holder?
So a line holder is where when the schedule comes out for the month, you have a whole month's full of trips.
Okay.
You already know what you're doing. Oh, okay, so on the 17th, I'm flying from LA to Denver, then from Denver to Austin, and then we're going to spend the night there, and then I'm going to fly back to LA, and then fly out to Phoenix and back. So whatever your trip is, you've got it all planned out ahead of time.
So you can kind of
Uh,
plan your life a month in advance at that point.
yeah,
Okay.
month at a time.
Okay.
Yep.
So being a line holder is better. Now there's lots of ways. Again, we're not going to get into them all on this show because I'm not even sure that Cameron has enough experience at airlines yet to know all of the crazy ways that the senior pilots start bidding and tweaking their schedules. And there's all sorts of things they can do to optimize either for quality of life or optimize for maximum income or so forth. Like one of my buddies is very, very senior at Delta, captain. And so he bids almost exclusively for premium pay trips because he's got lots of kids in college. And he's like, dude, he says, I don't
I
need
need
time.
money.
I need money. I need as much
Yep.
money as I can possibly get. Shout out to Alex. Because I got kids in college, but we'll cover that. Maybe I'll get maybe I can get him on the show one day. So now we know what a line holder is. So now let's talk a little bit about pilot pay. So as airline pilots, you get paid in a variety of different ways. You're going to get your hourly times your minimum or the amount of flying that you're going to do. There's per diems, there's profit sharing, there's 401ks. There's a bunch of stuff. So let's unpack it all a little bit. So talk to us, and you don't have to give even specific numbers like whether the per diem is $2.50 an hour or $3.25 an hour. Like, who cares? That's not really the purpose of the interview. I want people to understand, well, like, what is a per diem? What is it? And when does it pay? And how the hours add up and so forth. So let's talk about the base pay first. As a first officer at a regional, these days, you're going to get about $90 an hour. Now, when are you getting 90 an hour? Is it all the time? Is it only when you're flying? Is it when you're hanging on reserve? Like, unpack that for us.
Yeah, that's a good question. If you're a line holder, you get paid when the plane pushes back from the gate, and the pay stops. The timer stops when you put the parking brake back on at your destination. So, people look at that hourly rate sometimes, and it's like, yeah, but that, like my time commuting out to California, not being paid.
Yeah.
Waiting in the terminal, not being paid. Planning the weather and the fuel, not getting paid. People boarding, still not getting paid yet, till they're all boarded, the doors closed, and we push back. So,
and that's called what kind of time?
Block time.
Block time. There you go. Okay.
Yep.
So block time is your $90 an hour time. Now, is there a way to get more than 90 an hour?
Well, the longer you're there, you get pay increases, but other things like on reserve, we will get emails sometimes where they really need someone to cover a trip that's going to, probably cancel if they can't get pilots for it. So they might incentivize, 150%, 200. I've seen 300% a couple times if you do this trip. So, and I always get these emails when I'm back home in Texas. So they're like, hey, are you still in California? Nope.
Yeah.
I'd sure love to get paid triple time, but I'm not there anymore. So yeah, those pop up. People can, it's a pretty penny, and get paid $270 an hour for your flying is pretty nice. Not gonna turn that down.
Or in Alex's case, over $1,000 an hour because his base as captain is already way up there.
Yeah, because I think their base pay is like $400 or $500, and then you do a 300% incentive for a Delta captain. Is just So that's just that kind of tells you how unwilling airlines are to cancel flights.
Yeah,
like it sucks when it happens to you or weather delays or whatever. But man, they're not doing that because they don't feel like making money. It's expensive. And then so when you're on reserve, it's a little different because we have a guaranteed minimum each month. Because like I was telling you earlier, if I go out for 4 days and just do one flight, that's not a lot of pay. I'm not making rent or anything that way. So they give you a base guaranteed minimum. In August, I actually broke that, so then they paid me the greater of the two. But that's a reserve thing. So sometimes, I'm not actually making any money if I get more flights, because it has to add up to more than my guarantee, or else it
Yeah.
doesn't actually matter. So,
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
which is to
don't get me
say,
wrong.
if you don't fly at all, you're still going to get paid your block time guaranteed minimum.
Yep.
Now, in addition to the hourly rate and the premium pay for the hourly rate, there's this thing called per diem. Explain what per diem is, and we'll just use an arbitrary figure. We're going to call it $3 an hour because that's probably close to what it is for a lot of airlines. So, what is it? How is it calculated? And does it add up to any meaningful money?
Well, your per diem is just per day, or really per hour, but it's per day because you were working. So they're going to pay you for being on the job. Especially if you're just sitting in an airport waiting to be on reserve, they're paying you for that. I know on the charter flying, the 135 guys, they get a lot of pay from their per diem, but then they also get a lot less in other areas. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I honestly don't know what the rate is for a reservist at our airline, but because I'm pretty sure unless you break that guarantee, it doesn't really make any difference for me. If I were a line holder, I think it would kick in, just because you are getting paid, literally for being at work as opposed to waiting around.
So wait a
So
minute. As a reservist, if your per diem, you don't get per diem over and above minimum necessarily.
not by itself, like if I have a month where I only flew like 12 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a per diem, but it doesn't add up anywhere near what the minimum is, the
Okay.
guarantee. So it doesn't make much difference.
And
So yeah,
my understanding of per diem, from what I can remember from reading the manual, and I'm probably wrong, so you can correct me. Wasn't it every hour that you were away from your base, you are getting the per diem hourly pay?
yeah, but I think, again, I don't think that's above guarantee.
Okay. But if you're
I'd
a
have to
line
check.
holder,
If you're line holder, sure, yeah,
okay.
yeah, and then of course the fine print is the away from base, because if you're on reserve and you're just sitting around, you're technically in base the entire time, so it doesn't make any difference. But yeah, it does kick in, but I believe it's not above your reserve pay. So now picking up extra trips on your days off is on top of your minimum. So if you have 8 days off at the first 8 days of the month, and you decide, hey, I want to do this trip, this quick trip to McAllen, Texas, and back. They will pay you that on top of your guarantee because you're working on your days off.
Yep.
So
And yeah, it's a good point. We forgot to mention that. So how is that something, do you fly on your days off very often?
not often. The trips out of Austin are very, very few, far between, because it's such a small base.
Yeah.
And a lot of the trips are not great trips. Like, fly to this place and stay in a hotel and fly back, and the total pay for being away from my family for overnight is like 2.5 hours worth.
Yeah.
So it's like I'd rather just be home.
Yeah.
But I have done, like I do one like the morning of Halloween, because it was like showed up 8 o'clock in the morning and I was done by 2, and it was out of Austin, so I didn't have to fly, to get to it. I just drove to it, so that's pretty nice.
Yeah. I mean,
But
you
yeah,
get
there are a lot of pilots that they are on reserve, and they pick up like as much open time flying as they can to pump that paycheck. And yeah, if that's what you want to do, I mean, we're older, we have a family that we want to spend time with, so it's kind of like,
yeah.
it's for me being out of base reserve, it's or out of home reserve. It's like I'm not home that much, so I don't want to be away more.
Yeah.
Um, but if I was based here in Austin, I'd probably pick up a lot more, just because if they're not using me, then technically my reserve days are my off days. If you really think about it, the other way
Yeah.
around. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
noticed there's some guys in the text string. They seem to be picking up a lot of the younger single guys picking up, and gals picking up a lot of flights on their days
yeah,
off. And
yeah.
why not?
Yes, and they all live in base, which helps with that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and they're going to get
definitely.
the captain that much sooner because they're getting their 1,000 hours that much sooner. And again, if you're young, like, why not? You've got all the benefits to gain from that. Okay, so that's per
Yep.
diem. Profit sharing. Do you have any? So I don't remember what it was, but can you speak to profit sharing at all, either in general or any specifics?
Yeah, most companies, if it's, I think you have to be out of your probation period, so not yet for me, but at the end of the year, they'll usually give you profit sharing. There's usually a sliding scale based on number of years of service and a
Hmm.
whole bunch of stuff. So just because it's if the airline's making record profits, we're quite literally the you know part of that profit enabling machine. So
Yeah.
they want to they want to compensate us. But yeah, I think while you're on probation, which for my airline's a year, you don't participate in that. So that's why I haven't looked into it too closely because it doesn't really apply to me yet. So
Wasn't there
um,
some bonuses though that most everybody, excluding me because I wasn't there anymore, in the class got relatively early on, or is my memory foggy?
yeah, there were sign up bonuses for that like cadet program. I think
Hmm.
I know like some of our military classmates, there were some different ones they got. So there were some where if you were to incentivize, finishing training, you got this bonus. And of course now they have that training contract, which is like the other opposite of that, where you owe them money if you just
Walk
skedaddle
away.
too early. But
Yeah.
but yeah, there are companies that will give you those bonuses for their various levels of strings attached. I know some have a lot of strings attached and some don't. So and it's always changing based on the contract. So it just depends.
Okay, and for folks who want more detail on that on an airline specific basis, literally just ask any AI tool. Tell me about the bonus plan for name your airline, and you're going
Yeah.
to get
What do I
actually
need
quite
to
a
be a cadet for XYZ airline?
yeah,
Because they all have different rules. Not enough
yeah,
hours, too many hours, wrong flight school you're attending, or
yeah.
what have you. So yeah.
All right, and then the last one, and we don't really need to probably go very far down this rabbit hole, is the retirement plan. So all airlines that I'm aware of have a retirement plan where usually, they're matching your contribution. In some cases, it's a significant match. Um, and again, people can just ask AI or Google to say, "Hey, for such and such airline, how does the retirement plan work?" And you're going to get all of that detail. So without having you speak to that, is there anything just in general about the retirement plan that was a surprise to you, or just something you didn't know, and you think it would helpful for the audience to be aware of, or no?
Well, so my other life, I was a financial advisor, so I kind of was already pretty in tune with that stuff. But um, yeah, the matching increases the longer you've been working for the airline. I think that's pretty standard at the airlines. So definitely, take advantage of that because the company is throwing in money for your retirement, which is a great thing. Way back in the day, there were pensions at some of the legacy airlines, but those have all gone the way of the dodo. So yeah, not a lot of surprises for me as far as it's a pretty standard 401k. You've got a lot of choices to invest in, and they've got the matching, and you can do Roth 401k or regular. So I'd say if you're a younger person and have not started saving for retirement, definitely sooner than later.
Hmm.
Yeah, definitely try to just carve some thing out of the budget so you can afford at least get the matching, the free money. So
Yep. Yep.
yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
All right, Cameron. Before we conclude, first off, thanks to the audience for hanging this far. I hope you guys found it interesting. Is there anything that we have not discussed that would sort of fit in with what we have discussed, but I just haven't asked you about it? And if you can't think of anything, that's fine. But this is a question I always like to ask at the end of an interview.
Yeah, I'd say don't people should look into the charter flying 135 flying because that's a route that I know a lot of pilots are very happy with.
Hmm.
It is not the same lifestyle as the airlines. It's different in a lot of key ways. So I definitely think researching that would be helpful for people. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the airlines, but it is a very unique lifestyle that's not for everybody.
Hmm.
Um, just talk to a flight attendant or a pilot in an airline, and like I remember talking with my uncle And he was like, "That's crazy. I could not do that schedule. I don't know how you could do that." He wants to know his 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. These are the hours and days I'm working, and these are the days are off. But with the airlines, it's completely bonkers compared to that. It's definitely not a 9 to 5, which I think a lot of people are looking for because not everybody wants to sit in a cubicle 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but definitely there are a couple different routes as far as airline career or flying careers go. That is it's worth a look, just to see if it's a better fit for you or not. So
And I do know some corporate. I have some buddies that are corporate pilots, and they're very happy doing what they're doing. One of my friends here in Boise, he flies for a wealthy family, so that's called Part 91. They own their own aircraft, and he is the SIC, so second in command on it's a Gulfstream. It's almost the biggest Gulfstream. It's a really wealthy family, and they pay him almost, I think, if memory serves me correctly, it's just shy of $300,000 a year. And in an average month, he will fly 4 to 7 days. And the rest of the time, he's on his own. He's not on call. So he's got a lot of time off and very good cash flow. And, the big, I guess, probably the biggest difference between corporate and airlines is there's no seniority in the corporate world.
yeah,
So if you're a good networker and you get to know a lot of people and spend a lot of time talking to those people and hanging out at airports and doing the things to put yourself around those people, you can find yourself in some pretty incredible opportunities. As a matter of fact, I've got a couple of interviews that I'm hoping to do here in the near future with a couple of corporate pilots who did exactly that. So stay tuned to the channel for those stories, as they should be coming your way sometime in the next month or so from whenever this video is published. So on behalf of the audience and myself, Cameron, I want to thank you very much for spending an hour with us. I think this was fun. It was fascinating. And I'm sure bummed out that I'm not up there in the E175 myself just at the moment, but hopefully that'll get switched. So thanks for being here.
oh, you're welcome. I hope to see you at the airport in uniform again sooner than we think. So
Indeed. Yeah, that uniform
indeed.
sitting in a folded pile in my closet.
Yeah, yeah.
All right,
Well, we're
everybody.
glad that
So
you're doing better, though. That's the important part.
me too. I am glad
Yeah,
to not be dead. That is a big plus to still be
yeah.
alive. So thank you very much, everyone. If you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like. If you have questions for Cameron or myself, that's what the comments are for. And if this is your first time watching a video here on Fly with Trent, I produce monologue videos. I produce a lot of shorts. I produce interviews like this. You can either visit the website flywithtrent.com, where you can get on the email list and you'll get a copy of my fast track training blueprint, which people really, really love, especially if you're considering a career in the airlines. Kind of gives you a high level overview of what's involved in getting there. And also here on YouTube, you can be a subscriber, click the bell. And if you're an Instagram user, just either search my name or search Fly with Trent, and you can find me on Instagram there as well. So thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you in another video soon. Take care. Bye-bye.